The betrayal that shook America's heartland did not happen overnight. Behind closed doors, far from the fields they once championed, John Deere's executives were already charting a different course. They were not plotting a rebellion against Trump or thumbing their noses at tradition. They were following cold, calculated numbers. Rising labor costs, tightening U.S. regulations, and unpredictable tariffs pushed them toward a future where loyalty mattered less than survival. The memos had been clear for years. If Deere wanted to endure, it had to think beyond American soil. It had to think globally. For farmers across the country, this was no longer just about politics. It was about staying alive. The machinery they depended on was suddenly at the center of a political firestorm. Should they stand with Trump and boycott Deere? Or should they stick with the company that had helped them feed their families for decades? The choice wasn't easy. In some counties, John Deere decals were scraped off tractors with pocket knives. Local equipment dealers reported customers refusing service calls. Facebook groups sprang up urging others to buy American, even if that meant switching brands. At the same time, not all farmers were on board with the outrage. Many quietly questioned Trump's strategy. Could America really afford to punish one of its most iconic manufacturers in the middle of a global food and equipment crisis? Others noted that Key and Kubota, two major Deere competitors, also had large international manufacturing operations. Was this truly about patriotism or politics? At the core of it all was trust. For over 100 years, John Deere had stood by farmers. Now the brand was being tested like never before. In church basements and grain elevators, the conversations grew more tense, more urgent. Loyalty was no longer a given. It was a gamble, and that fear was about to hit their wallets hard. The hidden price farmers were already paying. Trump's tariff blitz against John Deere was framed as a punishment for corporate betrayal, but the ones feeling the heat weren't sitting in boardrooms. They were out in the field. For farmers across America, the immediate impact was not political validation, it was financial pain. Behind the patriotic speeches and rally chants, real people were making hard choices about how to keep their farms alive, and it started with prices. Before the tariffs, a mid-range John Deere tractor cost roughly $180,000. After the tariffs took effect, that same machine could surge past $230,000, depending on its origin and configuration. That kind of price spike was not theoretical. It had invoices, dealership quotes, and financing contracts. For farmers already drowning in debt, that bump was the difference between upgrading critical machinery or running another year on a tractor older than their kids. Supplier contracts began unraveling as manufacturers tried to navigate the volatility. Steel prices went up, component imports stalled, and freight rates ballooned. And through it all, John Deere had to make tough decisions. Decisions that trickled down to the end user. Delivery delays, shrinking parts inventory, and reduced financing flexibility became the new norm. Some farmers began cannibalizing older machines for parts because replacements were either unavailable or unaffordable. Maintenance costs, already a heavy burden, began rising sharply. Older machinery became more expensive to repair, but there was no affordable alternative. Some mechanics stopped servicing the newest models altogether, citing a lack of software access or diagnostic tools. Others started hoarding parts for loyal customers, treating maintenance like wartime rationing. Farmers were stuck. They could not afford to buy new, and they could not afford to let the old break down. And while costs ballooned, something else began to eat away at farmers: fear of being left behind. Larger operations with deeper pockets could still afford to upgrade and adopt precision agriculture tech. But for small and mid-sized farms, the gap widened. As one farmer put it, it's like bringing a pitchfork to a drone fight. The sense of falling behind was not just about equipment, it was about survival in a rapidly shifting agricultural economy. The toll was emotional. Fathers who had farmed their land for 4 decades started warning their children to seek different careers. Generational farms quietly went up for sale. Their owners were too proud to admit defeat but too drained to keep going. What began as a political fight had become a slow-motion economic collapse in the heartland. And while farmers were watching their futures disappear, the financial elite were watching something else entirely. The shockwaves weren't limited to farmland. The stock market noticed too. We spent weeks digging into dealer reports, tariffs, and farm data. So if you value real research, hit subscribe. There's more coming you won't find anywhere else. Wall Street walks while Main Street burns. If you listen closely during the chaos, you could hear it, the sound of money moving quietly but decisively. While farmers were pleading for price relief, hedge funds were shorting John Deere stock. While Main Street braced for impact, Wall Street started playing both sides. For every public word of support, there was a silent sell-off or a bet against the company's next quarter. The stock market didn't care about rural identity or patriotic values. It cared about margins, risk, and momentum. Every Trump rally that mentioned John Deere sent waves through trading floors. A promise of harsher tariffs, a stock dip, a hint of resolution. It ticked up. Speculation became profit. Traders didn't need to understand farming. They just needed to anticipate the next press release or tweet. Volatility for them was not a threat. It was a gold mine. Inside boardrooms, the tone was entirely different. Executives and institutional investors were recalculating. Was Deere's overseas pivot a smart long-term play? Or would the backlash from Trump's base kneecap domestic sales? Was there any scenario in which both markets could be kept happy? Those were not questions about loyalty, they were questions about shareholder returns. Even within Deere's own investor circles, there were splits. Some saw the expansion as a way to hedge against U.S. instability. Others feared the brand would become a political punching bag. But everyone agreed on one thing. This wasn't just about tractors. It was about signaling. Was John Deere still an American company, or was it just another global brand chasing profit? Wall Street's response was revealing. Despite the noise, most major funds held their positions. Some even increased them, betting that the controversy would fade and Deere's international bets would pay off. That cold calculus spoke volumes. Wall Street cheered efficiency and offshoring in practice, while demanding American optics in public. The hypocrisy was palpable. Trump's economic strategy was hiding a deeper flaw, one that no tariff could fix, the automation trap that no one talks about. While Trump vowed to bring manufacturing jobs back to American soil, a quiet, invisible force had already replaced them. It was not China. It was not Mexico. It was automation. Across industries, from automotive plants to meat-packing facilities, robots had quietly taken over tasks once done by human hands. The machines did not strike, they did not demand health care, and they did not vote. The reality on the ground was stark. In the factories that still operated on American soil, the number of human workers was a fraction of what it was in the 1980s. Precision welders, assembly line sorters, and inventory checkers had been replaced by code and arms made of steel. Even when companies agreed to reshore their operations, the result was not job creation, it was job simulation. The lights went on, but few people walked through the doors. In agriculture, the same pattern was emerging. Farmers used to walk fields to test soil or spot pests. Now, drones and sensors did that work. Tractor fleets were increasingly semi-autonomous. AI-driven tools analyzed yield maps and irrigation data. One farmer could now manage the workload of 5. With the right tech, and Deere was one of the biggest suppliers of that tech. Ironically, the very company being punished for leaving was also the one selling the tools that eliminated the need for human labor in the first place. Trump's messaging, restore American jobs, punish outsourcing, ignored this reality entirely. His political strategy assumed a world where the enemy was foreign, but the real displacement had been engineered right here at home, under the radar, and often with investor applause. This was not to vilify Trump. Many politicians avoided this topic. Automation was not a clean political narrative. It did not fit neatly into left or right ideologies, and it did not have an easy solution. But avoiding it only made the crisis worse. American workers were promised a revival. What they got was a robot that worked faster and never got tired. John Deere, like every major industrial player, had embraced this future. Their tractors were not just machines, they were mobile data centers. Their harvesters could measure nutrient levels in real time. The company wasn't just building equipment, it was building a vertically integrated digital ecosystem that left laborers behind. And while the president fought shadows, Deere faced real global threats. Can John Deere survive the global battlefield? John Deere's pivot was not just a political gamble. It was a strategic necessity. The company was no longer just competing in Iowa or Kansas. It was up against giants across continents and markets that dwarfed even America's heartland. In India, Mahindra had become a behemoth, selling tractors by the millions and undercutting Deere's pricing by a massive margin. In Europe, Find's high-tech offerings appealed to progressive farmers and nations investing heavily in automation and sustainability. And in the United States, Kubota was quietly chipping away at Deere's market share with reliable, cost-efficient machines. These were not fringe threats. They were existential. While Trump painted the conflict as a moral betrayal, Deere's board saw a global battlefield that required adaptability or extinction. Their move overseas was not an escape, it was an offensive. Global manufacturing was entering a new phase, the subsidy war. Countries were not just competing on cost, they were offering tax breaks, land grants, and infrastructure to lure production. Brazil offered Deere streamlined regulatory access. India rolled out rural mechanization credits. The United States, by contrast, offered uncertainty tariffs one day, deregulation the next, followed by threats of punishment. Deere's leadership analyzed global market share shifts over the past 5 years and saw a clear trend. Unless they expanded fast, they would fall behind. U.S. farmers were still loyal, but loyalty could not beat volume. International growth meant survival. But the gamble came with a cost. If U.S. customers felt abandoned, they might. If Trump's tariffs triggered retaliatory moves from Brazil or India, Deere's new markets could evaporate. The company was navigating a minefield, and every misstep had consequences measured in billions of dollars. But even if John Deere won on the world stage, it might lose the war at home. When farmers turned on the green and yellow, John Deere symbolized rural pride, tradition, loyalty, and American grit. From the roaring plains of Nebraska to the lush farmlands of Iowa, John Deere's green and yellow colors were stitched into the very fabric of life. But after the company's decision to shift more manufacturing overseas, something unimaginable happened. Farmers who once wore those colors with pride began to tear them down in anger. It started slowly. A video surfaced online showing a farmer burning his John Deere cap. The flames reflected in his tear-filled eyes. Another clip showed a man scraping the John Deere logo off his tractor with a crowbar, the scraping sound louder than his cursing. Across rural America, symbols of allegiance were becoming symbols of betrayal. Dealerships reported fewer walk-ins. Longtime customers, once eager to browse the newest models each season, now drove past in silence, unwilling even to stop and look. Inside those dealerships, salespeople who had built their livelihoods on trust and neighborly service now stood by idly, watching a century of goodwill evaporate. The emotional divide ran deeper than sales numbers. Fathers who had proudly passed down Deere equipment to their sons were now engaged in heated arguments at kitchen tables. For some, loyalty to Trump's America First rhetoric outweighed decades of tradition. For others, practicality and the sheer utility of their machines kept them tethered to Deere, but the emotional bond was fraying. Facebook groups, once filled with pictures of proud harvests and shiny new combines, were flooded with calls to boycott, accusations of corporate greed and heartfelt declarations of disillusionment. A post that went viral in early 2025 summed up the new mood perfectly. John Deere left us when we needed them most. They sold us out just like the politicians. Never again. That sentiment echoed through every corner of the heartland, reaching a deafening roar. The betrayal was not just about factories or jobs, it was about identity, pride, and survival. And then, out of this anger and heartbreak, something new emerged. It was not just words anymore. The farmers were ready to act. They were organizing. They were boycotting. And this time, it was not an empty threat. But the real question remained, could this grassroots rebellion actually succeed in bringing a giant like John Deere to its knees? Traditional rivals closed in. Brands like Case IH, Kubota, and New Holland lived in John Deere's shadow. They fought for scraps while Deere dominated the American farming landscape, capturing loyalty not just with machines but with mythology. But now, with John Deere bloodied and vulnerable, the rivals sensed their chance to rewrite the story of American farming. Case IH was the first to strike. They launched a national marketing campaign invoking patriotism with stunning effectiveness. Billboards appeared overnight across farming regions, bold red tractors beside American flags with slogans like "Built for Farmers," "Built for America." Their ad spots ran during country music award shows, local rodeos, and even Sunday morning farm reports, hammering the message home. When John Deere abandoned you, we stayed. Kubota was no less aggressive. The Japanese manufacturer, long known for its affordability and reliability, saw a golden opportunity. They offered new dealer incentives, bundling discounts, and special trade-in programs designed to make switching as painless as possible. Farmers who might have hesitated before were now being courted directly, with Kubota's sales teams attending farm shows, state fairs, and even local county meetings to pitch their products face-to-face. New Holland also moved fast, aligning itself with the farm-first movement sweeping rural America. Their messaging focused on listening to farmers' needs, not corporate boardrooms. They promised partnerships over politics, loyalty over global profits, Farmers who had once laughed at the idea of abandoning John Deere now found themselves taking serious test drives of Case IH, Kubota, and New Holland equipment. And as they did, a powerful psychological shift was taking place. The idea that only John Deere could deliver quality farming equipment was cracking, and with it, the company's iron grip on rural America. But while these old competitors fought for the spoils, a new, unexpected threat was rising, one that could render both John Deere and its rivals obsolete. Tech disruptors in the end of the old guard. While John Deere and its traditional rivals battled over the loyalty of American farmers, another revolution was quietly gaining momentum. One that had nothing to do with old brand names or patriotic slogans. It was a technological uprising that promised to change farming forever. At the center of this movement was Monarch Tractor, a bold new startup pushing electric, fully autonomous tractors into the mainstream.